5 coffins, Catherine. You buried the truth, now I'll bury your career.
I'm David, 46 years old, and I run a cybersecurity firm specializing in corporate espionage prevention. What happened to me over the past year reads like a thriller novel, but every single word is my reality. This is the story of how my wife's ultimate betrayal became her powerful family's complete and utter downfall. Let me paint you the full picture from the beginning. I married Melissa 8 years ago after meeting her in 2013 when I was transitioning from military cybersecurity operations to private consulting. Coming out of 12 years in military intelligence, I was still adjusting to civilian life when this absolutely stunning woman walked into my world. Melissa was this brilliant property developer who could command any boardroom she entered, close million-dollar deals with a smile, and navigate high society like she was born to it. Melissa came from serious old money, the kind of family that appears in society magazines and has buildings named after them. Her mother, Catherine, is a federal appellate judge with connections reaching all the way to Washington, D.C. Her father, Vincent, owns a sprawling empire of luxury resorts and hotels from Miami to Martha's Vineyard. This wasn't just wealth. This was generational power that opened doors most people didn't even know existed. Our twins, Jake and Emma, were born 3 years into our marriage. And honestly, for several years, everything seemed absolutely perfect. Melissa was climbing the social and professional ladder while I was building my client base with Fortune 500 companies and government contractors. My work involves sophisticated threat assessment, digital forensics, sometimes even extraction services for executives working in dangerous international situations. The money was excellent, better than excellent, really, but the hours were absolutely brutal. Melissa loved everything about the lifestyle my income provided. Designer clothes from Milan, exclusive charity galas where she rubbed shoulders with senators and CEOs, private schools for the kids that cost more than most people's annual salaries, spontaneous vacations to European capitals. She absolutely thrived on being married to someone who mattered in security and intelligence circles. Politicians knew my name, Fortune 500 CEOs had me on speed dial, and foreign governments occasionally contracted my services. But here's what Melissa never really understood about my profession. Cybersecurity isn't a 9-to-5 job. It's 3 a.m. emergency calls about data breaches, spending weeks tracking sophisticated cyber threats across multiple continents, constant travel to client sites for security assessments. When a major corporation gets hacked or a government agency faces digital espionage, they don't wait for business hours to call me. The first real red flags started appearing around 2019, subtle at first, but increasingly obvious to someone trained in behavioral analysis. Melissa began taking unexplained business trips to cities where she had no current projects. She started having whispered phone conversations that would immediately stop the moment I entered any room. She was spending increasing amounts of time with investors and developers I'd never met, people she'd mentioned casually but never introduced me to. Most troubling of all, she became increasingly critical and resentful of my work schedule, as if she'd completely forgotten that those same demanding hours funded her carefully curated Instagram-perfect lifestyle. She'd make snide comments about me missing dinner parties or arriving late to school events, conveniently ignoring that my absence meant I was earning the money that paid for her designer dresses and exclusive club memberships. Being in cybersecurity, pattern recognition and behavioral analysis are literally what I do for a living. Every day I analyze digital behavior to identify threats and deception. The changes in Melissa's patterns were textbook indicators of deceptive behavior, but emotionally, I wanted to believe this was just a rough patch in our marriage. I tried everything I could think of to save what we had built together. I started cooking elaborate family dinners on weekends, coaching Jake's competitive soccer team despite having zero athletic background, reading bedtime stories to Emma even when I was so exhausted I could barely keep my eyes open after 18-hour workdays tracking international cyber threats. I planned surprise weekend getaways, bought thoughtful gifts, tried to be more present during the limited time I had at home. Nothing seemed to work. If anything, Melissa seemed more distant and resentful with each passing month. The smoking tool came during what should have been routine security maintenance on our home network systems. Yes, I know exactly how this sounds, and I know some of you will judge me for what I'm about to describe, but network security is literally my profession. And our entire home was integrated into a sophisticated digital security system that I maintained personally, while updating encryption protocols on Melissa's devices, something I did quarterly for all family devices as basic cybersecurity hygiene. I discovered hidden video files she'd downloaded from encrypted cloud storage accounts I didn't know existed. The metadata showed these files had been recently accessed and repeatedly viewed. The footage was professionally shot surveillance video from a luxury hotel suite at the Ritz-Carlton in Chicago. The timestamp showed this was recorded during Melissa's supposed business conference 3 months earlier, a trip where she'd told me she was meeting with potential investors about a major commercial development project. They definitely weren't discussing real estate deals. The video showed Melissa with Derek Morrison, a prominent real estate mogul I'd heard her mention casually in conversation but had never actually met. Derek was pouring expensive champagne. Melissa was wearing lingerie I'd never seen before, and there was an unmistakable Cartier diamond necklace on the nightstand that definitely hadn't come from me. The intimacy between them was obvious and heartbreaking, but discovering my wife's affair wasn't even the most devastating part of what I uncovered. Digging deeper into her devices, I found multiple encrypted messaging applications with months of detailed conversations between Melissa and Derek. These weren't just love letters between affair partners. They were strategic planning sessions for my complete destruction. Derek was systematically coaching Melissa on divorce tactics, explaining how to manipulate custody proceedings, even suggesting specific lies she should tell about my behavior. He told her the prenup would be meaningless if they could prove I was using company resources and surveillance equipment for personal monitoring. Melissa's responses made my blood run absolutely cold. Jake and Emma barely remember their father anyway. He's been emotionally absent for years, always chasing the next client. We'll make them understand he abandoned his family for money and career advancement. The conversations revealed something even more sinister than infidelity. They weren't just planning to divorce me. They were orchestrating a complete character assassination designed specifically to turn my own children against me permanently. Derek had connections with family court judges and was promising Melissa that they could paint me as an obsessive, controlling husband who used professional surveillance tools to stalk his own wife. That's when I stopped being a devastated, heartbroken husband and became what my military training had prepared me to be. A cybersecurity specialist with extensive military intelligence background and access to investigative resources most people can't imagine. My years in military intelligence taught me the fundamental rule of psychological warfare. Never react emotionally to threats or provocations. First, you gather comprehensive intelligence about your adversaries, analyze their vulnerabilities and pressure points. Then you neutralize the threat with surgical precision and overwhelming force. Instead of confronting Melissa or Derek directly, I started conducting the most thorough investigation of my entire professional career. What I discovered about Melissa's family was absolutely explosive, the kind of corruption that ends careers and destroys legacies forever. 15 years ago, Judge Catherine Walsh dismissed a vehicular homicide case that should have been a slam-dunk conviction. The official court record claimed insufficient evidence to proceed, but using contacts I'd developed during my military service, I accessed sealed federal files that told a completely different story. The defendant was Catherine's own brother-in-law, Robert Walsh, and the case involved far more than simple drunk driving. Robert had been driving under the influence when he ran a red light at 90 miles per hour, plowing directly into a minivan carrying the Hernandez family, Miguel and Maria Hernandez, along with their 3 young children aged 6, 8, and 10. All 5 family members died instantly in the collision. Catherine had systematically suppressed witness testimonies, buried police reports that clearly established Robert's guilt, and used legal technicalities to prevent physical evidence from being admitted in court. She'd literally orchestrated a cover-up of 5 homicides to protect her brother-in-law from consequences. Vincent Walsh wasn't an innocent bystander either. Financial records I obtained through intelligence channels showed strategic donations totaling nearly $500,000 to the district attorney's campaign fund, made through shell corporations just days after Catherine dismissed the case. The Walsh family had built their entire public reputation on judicial integrity and traditional family values, while covering up one of the most horrific drunk driving massacres in the city's recent history. I spent 3 intensive weeks building an absolutely ironclad case that would have impressed federal prosecutors. Bank statements traced through multiple shell corporations, campaign finance records obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, sealed court documents accessed through intelligence contacts, suppressed witness testimonies, original police reports that Catherine had buried. Even surveillance photos of Catherine meeting privately with the district attorney during the weeks before the case was dismissed. By the time I finished, I had enough documented evidence to destroy the Walsh family's reputation permanently, send Catherine to federal prison for conspiracy and obstruction of justice, and give the Hernandez family's surviving relatives the closure they'd been denied for 15 years. The beautiful irony of the entire situation? Melissa had always given me complete access to all family financial records, investment accounts, and legal documents because she trusted my expertise with complex financial planning and cybersecurity. That absolute trust she'd placed in me was about to become the most catastrophically expensive mistake of her privileged life. Then Melissa's attorney made what he thought was his winning move. Richard Steinberg, this notoriously arrogant Manhattan family lawyer with a reputation for absolutely destroying fathers in high-stakes custody battles, summoned me to his Park Avenue office for what he clearly expected to be my surrender. Steinberg's office was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling law books, Persian rugs worth more than most people's cars, original oil paintings of famous legal victories. He slid the divorce papers across his massive mahogany desk with the smuggest, most condescending smile I'd encountered in my entire professional career. "Sign these documents, David," he said, leaning back in his custom leather chair like he'd already won a chess match I didn't know we were playing. "Melissa retains full custody of both children, keeps the Tribeca brownstone and all furnishings, both vehicles including your Tesla, and 60% of your consulting firm's future earnings for the next decade. We're being extremely generous considering the circumstances. Fight this in court and we'll destroy your reputation so thoroughly you'll never work in security again. I personally guarantee you'll lose everything that matters to you." I didn't react the way he expected. Didn't get angry, didn't argue, didn't even look particularly upset by his threats. Instead, I reached into my leather briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope, placing it carefully on the polished table directly between us. When I spoke, my voice was completely calm and measured, the same tone I used when briefing military commanders about imminent threats. "Deliver this to your client immediately," I said, gathering my things without any sign of urgency. "Tell Melissa to review the contents very thoroughly before making any irreversible decisions about how aggressively she wants to proceed with this divorce." Steinberg frowned deeply, clearly expecting explosive anger or desperate pleading instead of this calm professionalism. "What exactly is this supposed to be?" "Just deliver it," I replied, standing to leave. "Tell Melissa the envelope contains information that will help her make fully informed decisions about her family's future." Inside that envelope was a comprehensive summary of the Walsh family's darkest secrets, organized like a federal prosecution brief. Photocopies of sealed court records detailing the Hernandez family massacre, complete financial statements tracing Vincent's illegal campaign contributions through shell corporations, surveillance photographs of Catherine meeting privately with the district attorney, suppressed witness testimonies that proved Robert Walsh's guilt beyond any doubt. The accompanying cover letter was written in the same professional tone I used for security threat assessments. "The enclosed documentation represents 15 years of suppressed evidence regarding vehicular homicide charges that were illegally dismissed through judicial corruption and campaign finance violations. Push this divorce proceeding too aggressively, and this evidence will be delivered to federal investigators, investigative journalists, and the Hernandez family's legal representatives simultaneously." I left Steinberg's office with him still staring at the envelope like it contained biological weapons, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. The phone calls started at exactly midnight that same evening. First Melissa, absolutely hysterical and barely coherent, demanding explanations and screaming accusations. Then Derek Morrison, her affair partner, sounding panicked and asking repeatedly whether I was planning to do anything crazy. Finally, Catherine Walsh herself called, her usually commanding judicial voice trembling with barely controlled rage and unmistakable fear. "What exactly do you think you want from my family?" Catherine demanded when I answered her third call. "Justice," I said simply, using the same calm tone I'd maintained throughout this entire ordeal. "You think you can threaten a federal appellate judge with fabricated evidence and conspiracy theories? It's not fabricated, Catherine, and we both know it. It's 15 years of suppressed truth about the Hernandez family massacre. Miguel, Maria, 6-year-old Sophia, 8-year-old Diego, 10-year-old Carmen. You remember their names, don't you? 5 innocent people eliminated by your brother-in-law while you systematically covered it up to protect your family's reputation." The silence on the line stretched for nearly 2 full minutes before she spoke again. her voice noticeably smaller and less authoritative than when the call began. "What are your specific terms?" "3 simple, non-negotiable requirements," I said. "First, Melissa immediately withdraws the divorce petition and signs revised custody documents giving me full legal and physical custody of Jake and Emma. Second, Derek Morrison transfers his minority stake in my consulting firm back to me at the original purchase price, not the artificially inflated valuation he's been demanding. Third, you resign from the federal bench within 30 days, before the Justice Department opens their formal investigation into your judicial misconduct. And if my family refuses these demands, then the Hernandez family finally gets the justice they've been denied for 15 years. Every major newspaper in New York gets the story that will define their careers, and federal prosecutors get a gift-wrapped corruption case that will make their reputations." I'd already sent carefully crafted anonymous tips to 4 different investigative reporters and a contact at the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. The tips contained just enough specific details to start asking dangerous questions the Walsh family couldn't afford to have asked, but not enough concrete evidence to immediately confirm the full scope of their corruption. Derek Morrison cracked first, which honestly surprised me given his reputation for ruthless business negotiations. Within 48 hours, he was leaving increasingly desperate voicemails on my office phone, his voice cracking as he begged for a face-to-face meeting to work out some kind of reasonable arrangement. He'd clearly done the mathematical calculation on what federal conspiracy charges would do to his real estate empire and personal freedom. Melissa proved tougher initially, showing up unannounced at my office 3 days later, looking absolutely haggard and demanding I explain why I was destroying innocent people who never did anything to hurt me. "Innocent?" I asked, maintaining the same calm professionalism I'd used throughout this entire situation. "Your family systematically covered up 5 homicides, Melissa. They denied justice to sufferers and their families for 15 years. The only innocent people in this entire story are Miguel, Maria, Sofia, Diego, and Carmen Hernandez, who never got the justice they deserved." The media attention started subtly, but built momentum quickly. Business journals began running investigative pieces about potential irregularities in high-profile judicial decisions involving political donors. Legal blogs started speculating about rumored federal investigations into campaign finance violations connected to dismissed criminal cases. Catherine's name wasn't mentioned directly in these early reports, but anyone working in legal or political circles could easily connect the dots. By the end of the first week, Catherine had abruptly canceled all scheduled public appearances and speaking engagements without explanation. Derek was liquidating non-essential business assets and transferring funds to offshore accounts. Classic behavior of someone preparing for federal criminal charges. The walls were closing in systematically, and they all knew it. The final confrontation happened in Steinberg's Park Avenue office, exactly 2 weeks after I delivered my ultimatum. The atmosphere was completely different from our first meeting. Steinberg's arrogance had evaporated entirely, replaced by nervous professionalism. Melissa sat across from me, looking like she'd aged 5 years in 2 weeks, her hands visibly shaking as she stared at the completely revised settlement documents. Everything she'd originally demanded was not just reversed, but obliterated. I received full custody of both children with unlimited visitation rights, kept our Tribeca brownstone and all properties, retained complete ownership of my consulting firm, while Melissa got a modest monthly alimony payment that wouldn't cover her current monthly shopping budget. Steinberg, his earlier smugness completely gone, quietly explained that his clients were fundamentally reevaluating their legal strategy, given new information that had come to light regarding potential federal investigations. When Melissa finally signed the documents, I could see tears forming in her eyes, but I felt no satisfaction watching her world collapse. Before leaving, I placed one final envelope directly in front of her on the conference table. "What's this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Consider it a parting gift. Information your affair partner probably should have shared with you earlier." Inside were photographs and documents Derek Morrison had no idea I'd obtained through my intelligence contacts. Professional surveillance photos of him, boarding a private jet to the Cayman Islands with his 25-year-old personal assistant. Bank records showing he'd been systematically draining their shared offshore accounts for 3 months, transferring millions to accounts she had no access to. Screenshots of dating app conversations where Derek bragged to other women about playing a desperate older married woman to gain access to her family's political connections and judicial influence. Melissa's face went completely white as she flipped through the evidence of Derek's systematic betrayal. Whatever romantic future Derek had promised her was already gone, along with the millions of dollars she thought they'd stolen from me. "This isn't real," she stammered, but her voice cracked with the recognition that everything was absolutely authentic. "It's very real," I said calmly. "Derek cleaned out your joint accounts 3 days ago. By now, he's probably relaxing on some Caribbean beach, laughing about how easily he manipulated both of us. The difference is, I was prepared for his betrayal because I understand how hunters operate." Melissa collapsed, weeping into her hands, while Steinberg kept his eyes on his papers, pretending not to notice his client's breakdown. Watching her life fall apart gave me no thrill, only a quiet relief that I had managed to shield my kids from people willing to ruin them for selfish gain. The fallout came fast, harsh, and absolute. Catherine stepped down from the federal bench within a week, citing serious family health problems, though no one in the legal world believed that excuse. The Justice Department launched an official probe 2 days later, and newspapers splashed front-page stories about decades of judicial corruption and hidden vehicular homicide cases. Vincent's luxury resort empire collapsed as investors pulled out and the Hernandez family's lawyers filed a massive wrongful end suit seeking hundreds of millions. Stock values tanked overnight, and top hotel chains canceled contracts in waves. Melissa lost everything that had once shaped her identity: the social circle, the lavish lifestyle, even the downtown condo Derek had secretly funded with shell companies. She ended up in a junior sales job at a suburban real estate office, driving a used Honda instead of her leased BMW, and renting a small apartment instead of our Tribeca brownstone. Her charity board seats were stripped, the country club canceled her membership, and old friends stopped answering her calls. In less than 2 months, she went from glossy magazine spreads to total social exile. Derek Morrison's crash was even sharper. Federal agents froze all his U.S. accounts and issued an international warrant for conspiracy, laundering, and tax fraud. The assistant he ran off with left him as soon as his credit card stopped working. The last update I heard through contacts was that he was hiding somewhere in Central America, drifting between cheap hotels, trying to dodge extradition. 3 months later, I was sitting on the back porch of our Tribeca brownstone, watching Jake and Emma chase fireflies in the garden as the Manhattan sun went down. Their laughter filled the air, light, pure, untouched by the battles I fought to guard their future. They didn't know about the federal corruption I exposed to protect them. They only knew their father chose them over everything when it counted. My cybersecurity company was thriving more than ever. The Walsh scandal actually boosted my standing with both government and corporate clients. People respected someone who could withstand attacks from powerful enemies using law and politics as weapons. I had expanded overseas and brought on several former military teammates, but for the first time I learned to balance work and life. Soccer practice with Jake every Tuesday and Thursday. Art projects with Emma on weekends. Family game nights every Friday. Bedtime stories every night, no matter what. The twins were excelling in school and making friends easily, showing no scars from the chaos Melissa and Derek had tried to inflict. I kept a single professional photo of Melissa on my office desk, not out of longing, but as a reminder. Trust isn't given on promises or appearances. It's earned through steady actions. Some betrayals aim to destroy your life, but they can also reveal what truly matters and who deserves your loyalty. The lesson? Never misjudge someone trained to uncover lies. Melissa and her family thought they could crush me, imagining I was only a husband and father too broken by betrayal to fight back. They forgot I was also a cybersecurity expert with years of military intelligence training, federal access, and over a decade of experience exposing corruption. The best answer to betrayal isn't rage or loud confrontation. It's careful planning, patience, and letting people's own rot consume them. Justice doesn't always come with fiery speeches or violent revenge. Sometimes it's simply steady investigation, perfect timing, and letting the truth do its job, burning lies to ashes so they can never rise again.